And a very good morning to you, an early morning in fact, from the heart of Bedfordshire in Leagrave near Luton, and the source of the River Lea, which begins a quite long walk for me, right the way down to the River Thames. The River Lea starts here in the Chiltern Hills and in fact rises almost below my feet now and turns into a small chalk stream. Sadly a slightly polluted with litter chalk stream at this point, which is somewhat sad to see. Runs off through Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire around the Essex border and into Greater London, and comes out at Bow Creek by the River Thames in London. So this is going to be a number of parts, and at this moment in time I can't tell you how many parts this walk is going to take, but today part one will take me from here in Leagrave to where the river flows through the town of Luton. It's about a 5-mile walk, should take me about an hour and a half to an hour and 40 minutes, and then part two will be my next walk heading towards Harpenden, and I'll be doing that as soon as I possibly have a moment in time. So we should see, possibly, dependent on the amount of time it takes me to complete this walk, a number of, let's say, season changes. It's right in the middle of summer at the moment, and it's about 6:30 in the morning, so it's beautiful broad daylight and a nice crisp fresh morning. So let's get on our way. This is Leagrave Park, as I say, in Leagrave, just to the north of Luton in Bedfordshire. And I suppose you could say that the river, albeit its source is here, it doesn't stay in Bedfordshire for all that long. It starts to flow generally in a southerly direction towards London, and in the probably about 8 miles from here we'll enter Hertfordshire, which would be the bulk of its meanderings across the country. So let's see what we see along the way. It's the first time I've ever been to this this part of Luton, and as you can see, it is a typical chalk spring area surrounded by trees, lots of thriving undergrowth and so on, primarily because of all the moisture that is just seeping out of the ground here. The river does go underground at various points between here and Luton due to the development over the years of the town, so we'll try to keep to it as closely as possible. There is various River Lea walks for the entire length of the river, obviously looked after by different authorities along the way, so they all appear differently and may disappear completely in parts, but there's a combination of various websites, the Go Jauntly app and Google Maps. I'm sure I'll be able to keep as close to the River Lea as I possibly can. I'm not going to start off with too much of a rant, because it's not actually too bad here, but it does sadden me when I do see litter floating about in streams and rivers. But I have to say, just here in Leagrave Park, can't actually vouch how clean that water is and how much pollution or litter's buried down there amongst the silt and so on. But certainly on visually from here, it doesn't look too bad. I think that might change in parts as we head in towards Luton, but let's see how we go. I've lived in and around the Chiltern Hills for the majority of my life, and anyone that knows this area or indeed areas of anywhere in the world that are next to chalk hills. They're normally pleasantly sprinkled with springs and chalk streams, and here is no exception. All along the Chiltern Hills you'll find them, small ones. This is one of the ones that starts off as a small stream and actually turns into a full grown river in its own right. Many are chalk streams that empty out into other rivers further along, but this remains the River Lea from its very beginnings here in Leagrave, which is why I've chosen to walk this particular one. The striking thing with the chalk streams is how shallow they tend to be, generally speaking very slow moving, and crystal clear water, certainly at the early part of them. I live very close to another spring called Orton Head, which eventually empties out into the river. Here's one or two others, and I think, if my memory serves me correctly, into the River Great Ouse, which ends up in the Wash. So we must be very close here on the Chiltern Hills to the point where the water goes off in one direction towards the Thames and in the other direction towards other rivers. The watershed, that's the word I was looking for. I was just thinking back to my days of geography at school. Must be fairly close to a watershed. And slightly north of here, the water will tend to go off towards the east and the north, out towards the North Sea. So, still, and it's amazing how quickly the river becomes quite a big river. You will see from here how slowly it's moving just at this point. Sadly, we'll also see how much litter has ended up over there, with these ducks having to swim around it. I guess that's well, I wouldn't say to be expected, because you know, if there is anybody in the watching this video, which I suspect there probably won't be, but if there is, that actually deliberately throws things into rivers, stop doing it. Yeah, just stop it. Find a dustbin, there's plenty of them about. Take it home with you. However, I suspect a lot of it isn't deliberate. It's just carelessness, or got there accidentally, or blown in the wind, whichever. I like to think there aren't too many people on this planet that deliberately throw things into rivers, or indeed anywhere else. I'm sure there are some. Anyway, try not to dwell on that too much. It's Leagrave Park here. It's not your typical park, really, I don't suppose, but it's certainly got a nice path going around it that you can jog along, cycle along. Plenty of parking, children's playground over there. And of course it is still quite early in the morning, so not too many people about. And here would be your first port of call for a refreshment, should you want one. I'll be giving it a miss. This is where the river takes its first little dive underneath a road, Birmingham Road here. We're going to cross over here past McDonald's and head on down the path alongside the river. There was a kind of a weir back there that just holds the water back a bit, which was why it was more slowly flowing than it is now, and kind of wider and more of it. I guess that's just to hold the water in the park, to keep that habitat within the park fresh with water, but it begins to flow a bit more freely now. once it's past that weir. There will be parts where you can't actually walk next to the river. It doesn't actually have a footpath along it for the majority of the way. You know, it's its own footpath. It tends to be paths that are just either nearby or reasonably close to it, like now. But just up here, we'll turn off down a defined footpath away from this road. In this Upper Lea walk, this is probably the, hesitate at using the words, the nicest part of the walk, but or rural, because it's certainly, we're in the middle of a town here, so it's never going to be that rural, but this is the nearest to rural and the nearest to nicest that you're going to get from Limbury Meads here through to Bancroft Road, was it? But it's a fairly countrified little part of the walk, and the river's just over there. You can see where it's flowing. Some people are lucky there to have their gardens right up to the river edge, which is nice. Meander quite well just in this part of the town. I'll be interested to come down here in when it's not summer, let's say, because it's the undergrowth and foliage and so on is huge along here, as you'd expect with all this water for it to feed off. But I'm sure in winter time there's a lot less of it. But that river's flowing away nicely down there all the time. There's going to be a little bridge shortly and cross over to the other side of it. Somewhere just down here, I think. Like a bit of bank has fallen in there, doesn't it? Or something. They've done some work, built a drainage. Yeah, I think some drainage works happened here, probably from this new housing estate to drain street water off, rainwater I should say, off the street. Yeah, that's all very new, isn't it? Hopefully mostly clean water into the river. Well, it's not really anything too grand, but this will be the first crossing of the River Lea so far on this walk, barely a mile in. And as you can see, this footpath, it's not necessarily dedicated to the fact it's alongside the river. We'll tell you, you've got Houghton Regis and Dunstable 4 and 6 miles respectively, back where I've just come from. And town centre 3 miles. That's where I'm headed today. So it's saying it's only 3 miles to the town centre from here. I guess that just rather depends on which part of the town centre they're talking about. The Go Jauntly map and also Google Maps was suggesting it was nearer to 3 miles from back there at the spring. I don't think I've come to yet, but certainly I've come over a mile. This is a purely optional move here. You can take that route or cross over the River Lea again, just here, to make it crossing number 2. I'm going to make it number 3 in a moment when I cross back over again. Flowing quite slowly here and sedately. There really is a lot of foliage and undergrowth. And if you like making nettle tea or nettle wine or something like that, then get yourself down here, because it's there is an abundance. And here we are, crossing number 3. I will stop doing this counting business. 1, because it'd probably get very boring, and 2, I'll forget where I'm up to before too long anyway. I mean, wow, it almost looks like the river's slightly has dried up here. It isn't, it's just all the reeds and so on in there that are in absolute abundance, but there is water flowing down there underneath. That'll certainly help to clean the river a little bit. Just going up to Neville Road now. I can hear the river gurgling away to my left there quite nicely. We're just going to cross over Neville Road and then take another footpath from the other side, just up there to the left and then the right. I presume the river goes underneath this road. Well, it's not going to go over it, is it? And this is also where the Icknield Way and Neville Road join. Anyone that knows anything about historic cross-country roads or trails will have heard of the Icknield Way. That's probably going to be one of my walks for the future, the full length of the Icknield Way. Anyway, here we go. At this point is where the river goes underneath the road. Quite hard to see it from here. I can just make it out just about, but this is where the River Lea is joined by Cat Brook. So there's a bit of a hillock over there where presumably Cat Brook gurgles its way out of the ground, and it joins the River Lea just there. On we go. Right, so just coming up to Bancroft Road, I believe. Now, this is where the Go Jauntly app, Google Maps, and the website relating to the Upper Lea River walk all disagree with each other. So I'm probably going to go with the signage here, assuming there is some signage. The Go Jauntly takes me off to the left there. Google Maps makes me turn right, and I'm hoping at least there's signage that sends me roughly in a direction towards some sort of path. Otherwise I'll be away from the river for a little while. I'll kind of traverse around it along that road over there. So possibly it's going through private land or a school or something like that. I don't know yet, but I'll have a look in a moment and we'll see where the signs take me. I think is probably going to be the sensible move here. So that's wasn't quite clear why I can't walk over that bit on the map. It's a allotment, so I'm going to take this route here. There she goes. Complete with a bit of litter, I'm afraid to say. Let's take this route. The signage is sending you this way, so if you look on as detailed as you can get on Google Maps, it does kind of say that you can take the other route to the right, but it's not 100% clear whether you can make it all the way through back to the river at the end of that road, so I'm thinking possibly you can't. So the river's just over to my right now, and we'll kind of be almost parallel to it for about a quarter of a mile, 3/4 of a mile, half a mile, something like that. Well, that's a nice feature to have in your allotments, a river coming through the middle of it. Right, so with a combination of the Go Jauntly app route, the Upper Lea Valley Walk map and Google Maps, I'll conclude that going this way will be better than carry on up that road there, and we'll come back to the river just down here and begin walking alongside it again. So not too much of a diversion there, but it seems to be the place where you can't walk along it in this part of Luton is a very, very large allotment, so they're locked up and you can't get in there. But, certainly a decent use of the land around the river in that area, I guess. So quite about 100 metres away from the river there, I can just see the tree line over in the distance there, where the river is. So just come over a little bit of high ground, and that I think you probably, if you walked in from the other side, could get into that area of long grass and so on down there. We'll come back to the river shortly, just over this hill and back down the other side, and we'll get back to where the river's flowing. Well, we've just come out of that footpath now, and the river has disappeared somewhere underneath the A6 here, the New Bedford Road, and re-emerges somewhere up here on the left. And it kind of follows next to the A6 all the way into the centre of Luton from here. So there's a footpath just away from the A6 New Bedford Road here, and it's just going to turn in to go more or less next to the river now until we get to Wardown Park, which is a very nice park actually. It goes right the way through. There's a lake there. Certainly at peak times in summer and weekends there's things like ice cream vans. I think there's a cafe there. Oh, I can't remember now. I'll have a look. It certainly won't be open at this time in the morning though, I wouldn't have thought. Wardown Park is a nice part to spend a little time at. River's just over there, hidden by all the foliage and trees again. Although I defend myself slightly here, as in I had to use an internet map and 2 apps to find exactly where I was supposed to be going. But I did miss this path and walk past it. It kind of veers off the cycle track over there, which the cycle track runs more parallel or next to the A6. This cuts on through the trees and closer to the river itself, and but it's fairly overgrown, so it wasn't obvious when I got to it what I was aiming for, but here we are. This should lead us up to Wardown Park. Well, that's nice. Coming back to the river here, meandering gently through this woods just before we get to Wardown Park. This is where the Go Jauntly app in particular comes into its own, because it clearly does show this path, although I didn't realise it was referring to this when I got to it. And it will guide you down paths such as this, but of course it can't guarantee how obvious it is, or whether it's been well maintained or it's become overgrown, that kind of thing. This certainly seems like a path that not all that many people tend to walk along all that often, so it's not well trodden, let's say. But it's nice, and thank you to that app, I've discovered another little path. And considering we're right in Luton now, it's quite incredible to think that there's this nature to go and walk through. And I would bet that all those people driving vehicles and vans and so on past there have got no idea it's even here. Let's have a look at that little cleanliness littering check just here. Yeah, you see, there's nothing too much been thrown in there. I see one or two through, I see a Coke can down the bottom there. Yeah. Well, this is nice, where the path suddenly becomes much more defined and looked after, as opposed to just a sort of a worn down track, really. Not really sure. We are getting towards the park now, so this is probably just on the edges of it. Then we move away from that again through this gate. That's interesting. Got houses backing onto the river there. I don't know why I'd have built breeze blocks at the end of my garden. I would have something with a gate in it at least, so I could get out to fill my watering can up from the river. Yeah, it's like a little mini park there. Interesting. Stone's just been left there. Luton's mini Stonehenge. Well, I certainly never knew this existed. I like walking by the sea, and I like walking by rivers, as I suspect most people do. And I have found, with one or two exceptions, that they're normally the nicest part of any given place and have the least undesirable stuff done to them. Usually land around rivers is protected to a certain extent. And it certainly seems to be the case here in Luton, which is very good to know. Certainly, as I say, this part of the River Lea, I can hear the sound of the road over there, the A6. We're quite well shielded from it now. It's been open farmland at one time, I suppose. Many years ago. Lutonian Cricket Club. There's a groundsman out there getting the wicket ready for the weekend, probably. But this terracing, or a bit almost like a football terracing, is interesting. Presumably built with the expectation of quite a few people coming to watch games. Or was it something else at one time? Does anybody know? You could certainly accommodate quite a big crowd here. Sat on here. Interesting. That's another place I've never been to as well. I'd be interested to pop in at some point. Wardown Park Museum. Very interesting. interesting old building. I've heard over the years some extremely negative comments about Luton. It's been the butt of many jokes, of course, and not least the song about its airport. But I always find with any places, no matter how much of a bad rep they get, or indeed how bad that they're perceived, there's normally some hidden gems in those towns, some places that you think, well, you know what, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. And some of the 60s and 70s architects and designers that approved some of the buildings in the town centre probably need to hold their heads in shame, because if there's anybody on the planet that thinks that, say, the Arndale Centre, as I call it, or the Mall, whatever it's called now, is anything other than a complete ugly heap of concrete and bricks, then they need to get the glasses changed. It is awful. But a lot of towns have that wherever you go to around the world and around Britain. It ain't all beautiful, but certainly this park, I've been to the park before. I've never been up this end of it actually, where I didn't realise there was a museum there. I've only really walked from the town direction, where I'm heading towards now, and around the lake that I'll be walking around shortly, which is fed by the River Lea. The river creates the lake and then flows out the other side of it to continue on its journey. I've basically come over that little hill there. The river itself takes a right meander over in that general direction over there. I can just see where it goes under the A6. I wasn't really able to get over that way, but it finds its way underneath the park here. And as a temporary break from its journey here in the lake. This is where it filters in. Rather undramatic way, I suppose you could say, and feeds this lake, keeps it nicely filled up with water, and we'll walk to the other end of it where it then reverts back to being a river and heads on its way into Luton and out the other side into the centre of Luton. Of course we're in Luton now. This is the the boathouse, and there's an old sign here to show you what it used to look like here. The suspension bridge, that was 1930, that picture was taken. The suspension bridge is still there and looking good. And I don't actually know if you're still able to hire boats from here. It doesn't look like you can really, although it's, I don't know, anybody know? But if you want to, if it's still possible, this is where you would come, the boathouse. Wardown Park. I imagine it's weekends in the summer only affair, if indeed it's happening at all. Boating and bathing. Yeah, it just refers to in years gone by. People used to swim in there as well. That's most definitely not allowed now. Oh, did that say? Let's just have a look. The iconic suspension bridge was built in the early 1900s following a period of closure, and after an extensive programme of repairs and renovation it was officially reopened in July 30th 2015. And there it is. Right, getting broken the back of the walk now, and to the last mile or so I'd say from here back to the centre of Luton, and the end of part one of this walk. So at this point that the Go Jauntly app is sending me away from the River Lea and taking me to the centre of Luton via a somewhat quieter road than the A6, which is what it's for, to give you nice green walks, if you like, away from busy main roads. So I'm going to deviate away from Go Jauntly at this point and stick to the river, which flows along the side of the New Bedford Road, the A6. So I would be turning off left just here and going up through the housing estates for a much quieter walk, but I shan't do that today because this walk is about the River Lea. And there's a fountain there. This is where it, although it shows it on the map as all this lake has been the River Lea, rather than what I would know it as Wardown Park Lake. I don't know if that's its official name or not. And well, yeah, not the best sight to see there, I'm afraid. This is where it turns back into a proper river, just along here. When you arrive from the Luton direction on the A6 to walk into the park, this is what you're greeted by, and it's not representative of the park as a whole and not a great advert for it, but hopefully they'll sort it out one day and make it look a little bit more inviting. Certainly all the garbage lying in there is very sad to see, I'm afraid. And until the river leaves Luton out the other side, unfortunately I think that's what's going to be the overwhelming theme of this river, very sadly. But there it goes, and we're right onto the A6 here, New Bedford Road. Really cool feature along the Bedford Road here, that the houses that are just off, that you can't really see them that well actually from the road itself, have got these nice little bridges across the river to get to their front. I guess it's their front anyway. Don't know if they've got any access at the other side from the streets behind them. I always find that to be quite a nice little feature for those houses. Yeah, as you get closer to the centre of Luton, which we almost are now, the whole situation about littering and rubbish being thrown in it's just getting worse and worse. I mean, that's just it's unacceptable, really, isn't it, if you think about it? Okay, as I always say, some stuff might get in there accidentally, by accident, or through carelessness or so on, but a lot of it isn't. It's just people being downright disgusting and throwing takeaway packages, cans, bottles and everything else straight into the river. Bit depressing, really, I'm afraid. But there you go. Yeah, we're just coming up to, I'm not sure where the river flows to from here. Presumably it goes underground shortly. Yeah, you got these hotels or restaurants just here on the waterfront, and indeed it is. Sadly, people have thrown things into the water, which rather spoils the ambience of it, I guess. Well, there we go. The river goes firmly underground. I'm going to try and follow its track the best I can to my final point in Luton, which is just near to the Arndale Centre, and end this video for today. But there you go. That's the majority of the River Lea so far above ground. Has a little meander underneath the streets of Luton for a while, and then proceeds out the other side of Luton off towards Harpenden, which will be my next walk. Will be from Luton to Harpenden. Just walking up the side of the Luton Mall, Arndale Centre, whatever you want to call it, and somewhere underneath my feet is the River Lea, and it does re-emerge here somewhere, albeit briefly, in this less than salubrious part of Luton. I think it comes out here. Can't see much water down there actually, just an awful lot of rubbish as per usual. Yeah. It's like a concrete channel underground. Now after, I mean, you know, everyone's got to take responsibility for that horrible mess back there. But ultimately I guess the council are in charge of it all. After they've allowed all that junk and rubbish to build up and float down into the river, they then go and spend heaps of money on this area here, which actually is quite pleasant. Although it does appear to have become a congregating place for street drinkers to congregate during the day, but ho-hum. Slightly reminiscent of the area near St Pancras by the Regent's Canal. They've got out this green grassy steps area where you can go and sit, but there you go. The river comes out there, continues on through Luton, and I'll be continuing my walk in part 2 in the very near future. Hope you'll join me.